Evening with a Legend is a series of presentations exclusive to legends of the famous 24 Hours of Le Mans, giving us an opportunity to bring a piece of Le Mans to you. By sharing stories and highlights of the big event, you get a chance to become part of the legend of Le Mans with guests from different eras of over 100 years of racing.
Tonight, we have an opportunity to bring a piece of Le Mans to you, sharing in the legend of Le Mans with guests from different eras of over 100 years of racing. And as your host, I'm delighted to introduce Bobby Rahal. Best known for his accomplishments in IndyCar, he also made notable appearances at the 24 Hours of Le Mans during the 1980s. Though endurance racing was not the primary focus of his career, Bobby showcased his versatility by competing in the iconic event multiple times, driving for teams like Porsche and March. Despite setbacks preventing a top finish, Rahal's participation highlighted his adaptability and competitiveness on the world stage, and his involvement in Le Mans reflects the broader scope of his racing legacy, bridging American open-wheel success with international endurance prestige. And with that, I'm your host, Crew Chief Eric from the Motoring Podcast Network, welcoming everyone to this Evening with a Legend. So, Bobby, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Nice to be with you.
Everybody's got a superhero origin story. So let's focus in on the part of your career that surrounds Le Mans. What initially drew you to compete at the 24, and how did that opportunity come about?
Some people who've known me for a long time would know that the early parts of my career were spent in sports car racing. That's where I started, specifically with SECA. But, my father raced at Sebring and Watkins Glen from 1969 to 1971. So we participated in the 12-hour and the 6-hour races. I grew up around sports car racing primarily. I mean, yes, open wheel racing was what I wanted to do. But at the time, as a kid, I was involved with his racing. I went where he went. So in any event, racing in those years, I got the chance to watch the greats at Sebring, Watkins Glen, and got to know later on got to know, but got to see my friend Brian Redman, race the 917 Porsches. Of course, Joe Sifford, Pedro Rodriguez, all the great drivers that drove for Porsche. And then, of course, the Ferrari drivers, Alfa Romeo. I mean, it was an amazing period of time. And so that really motivated me to a large degree. So really, before I got to IndyCar racing, I'd won Daytona 24 Hour. I had raced at Le Mans. So racing sports cars was really something that was frankly, a goal of mine. And to race at a place like Le Mans was a goal of mine. And I was fortunately, although not successfully, but fortunately, I was able to participate in.
Your road to Le Mans also involves the partnership and friendship that you grew with Bob Garretson.
Yes.
How did that come about, and how did he help get you to Le Mans in your first attempt with the 935?
Yeah, well, maybe go back a little bit. In 78, I was racing mainly Formula Atlantic in the United States. I raced in New Zealand that January of 78. Came back. That's when I was introduced to Walter Wolf, who owned the Wolf Formula One team, which Jody Scheckter drove for. And after the race at Long Beach in 78, Walter, he came to me and said, "Hey, I want you to drive our Formula 3 car that was based at Dallara, the Dallara that we know of today." It was based at his small factory in Verano, Italy, and with the idea that I would race certain Formula 3 races in 78 with the idea of racing Formula 1 races at the end of that year, which I did. I moved to Italy, lived over there for about 6 months or so, began my relationship with this wonderful man named Dr. Dallara, Ingegneri Dallara, a great guy, wonderful man. Drove his first Formula 3 car ever. Of course, later on, he would design and build cars that would really dominate Formula 3. And frankly, now I don't know of a series in the world that doesn't rely on Dallara to a certain degree for providing automobiles to go to race with. But in any event, at the end of 78, I did the U.S. Grand Prix, Canadian Grand Prix. The hope was I was going to drive for Wolf in 1979. They decided not to run a second car, which meant that I was on the outside looking in. Of course, I then went to drive Formula 2 in 1979 for the Chevron factory. Great experience, loved racing in Europe. I mean, I really loved racing. For me, even from the days I watched the movie Grand Prix, which had such a huge effect on my life, the idea of racing in Europe was, to me, that was the goal. And of course, I had heroes like Dan Gurney, who had done that for years and been very successful. Phil Hill, many others. So 79 drove Formula 2. Halfway through the year, I was hired by a fellow named Herb Kaplan to replace George Fulmer in his Can-Am car. Did that. We were pretty successful in that car. But really, my goal was still to race in Europe, hopefully get back to Formula One. That, as I said, didn't transpire. But at the end of 79, I went to Daytona for the last IMSA race. And I went there purely to meet people because I didn't really know, even though, I'd come from kind of a sports car background, I didn't really know many of the people involved in sports car racing. In those days, it was John Paul Sr., it was the Whittingtons. You had, of course, the Garretson team, Dick Barber, and the 935 Porsche, of course, was really the car to have at the time. So I went to Daytona purely to just introduce myself to everybody, which I did. To be honest with you, I can't really recall the meeting I had with Bob Garretson, but the next thing you know, I'm in Mountain View, California, which was where Garretson Racing was based. And we're there, and here's this really awesome 935 Porsche with Apple Computer all over it. And they hired me. It was, I think, about 6 races. In fact, I think we only did 6 with that car. John Fitzpatrick was the primary driver for Garretson, for Dick Barber Racing, Garretson Enterprises. And he had the Sachs 935. He won the championship in 1980, I believe, with that car. In fact, the car, that Apple car, really was an amazingly successful car. It won Sebring as a 934. It won Sebring. I don't think we ever won Sebring with that car as a 935, but of course we won at Daytona with it in 81. And then maybe even more famously in 1979, 78, I think it was, Paul Newman finished second in the same car at Le Mans, currently owned by Adam Carolla, who has it restored in the colors that Paul Newman drove in. But an amazingly successful car. So in any event, I'm trying to think, the first race we did with that car, I believe, was Sebring. And we did Riverside, a 6-hour Riverside race, did Sears Point, Watkins Glen. I was on pole at the Watkins Glen 6-hour race ahead of the Works Lancias and you name it. Everybody in the world was there. At Mosport, we raced it. And I'm not quite sure. I can't remember the other race. But in any event, I just got this opportunity through Garretson, through Bob, and probably Dick Barber, I would assume, to some level. It was a great experience. And I loved driving the car. And of course, then a year after that, we go to Daytona with Bob and Brian Redman and win the 24 hours. So, had a lot of success with that single car.
You already had a bunch of experience driving in Europe.
Yeah.
But Le Mans was still one of the crown jewels on your bucket list you wanted to race at. And then you finally get there in 1980.
Yeah.
Did it live up to your expectations?
It was such an amazing event. Le Mans, like they say the 3 biggest races are Le Mans, Indy 500, and Monaco Grand Prix. And I think that's so right because the environment is just so unique and so amazing and so electrifying that, with all due respect to all the other races around the world, you go to Le Mans, Indy, or Monaco, and I raced at Monaco in the Formula 3 series with Dallara. These are bigger than life, these events. And certainly Le Mans was no different. I mean, I watched the Steve McQueen movie when I was a teenager, 17 years old or whatever. Again, for me, because I wanted to race in Europe, to go to Le Mans was just a dream come true. And it didn't let me down in any respect at all. I mean, it was an amazing circuit. Of course, it still at that time had the original Mulsanne Straight, all 3 miles or so of it. It didn't have the original part that was like White House Corner and things like that, but it was still pretty much the original Le Mans. It had the Dunlop curve, which was a fantastic coming up the front straightaway, and we go underneath the Dunlop Bridge. Fast corner, very high risk corner, especially when it was raining. But yeah, I really ticked that, that little box on your bucket list or whatever to race at Le Mans. Even though we ended up not finishing the race that year, we had been competitive. Right? And so disappointing not to finish, but so satisfying just to have been there.
So a lot of other legends that have been on the show and are within your era, there's like a 20-year span there, talk about preparing for Le Mans, how difficult it was compared to today, where you have every simulator has a version of Le Mans that you can race and try. And how did you prepare for Le Mans? Did somebody give you notes or pointers, or did you just figure it out on your first out lap?
No, in my day, as you say, you didn't have simulators. I don't remember people taking much in the way of notes about anything. I mean, it's not like today. No, it was on the job training. You would go out and do practice. Regardless of what track you were coming to, especially if it was for the first time, your ability to be competitive was based on your ability to really learn the circuit quickly and to just have that ability to take it all in as quickly as possible and then take advantage of it. And of course, every session you drove, every time you went out, you were just building up that knowledge of the circuit. And that even held true during the race, during each stint you drove. There was just something else you would learn and you get better at it. So no, there was no Bondurant racing. There was no Jim Russell. There was no, again, no, as you say, no simulator. No, it was just up to you and the team. And yes, if you had, for example, I mean, I was so lucky to have to drive with Brian Redmond on a number of occasions because Brian would kind of fill you in. Yeah, hey, you got to look for this, look for that. But I would also tell you that most drivers, they didn't share that much. It's up to you, kid, to learn. And so you took advantage of every second you had on the track. And again, tried to learn everything you could every time you were in that car. And that's just kind of that was the way it was.
So let's dig into the 1980 race just a little bit more. You touched on some of the highlights. As a privateer team, Garretson Enterprises, right? This wasn't a Porsche-backed team. You guys were on your own, small operation. What was it like, strategy-wise, compared to what you were used to coming from IndyCar, coming from other racing? How did you have to adapt, challenges you had to overcome?
Well, remember, again, I hadn't been in IndyCar till 82. So when I went in 80, my experience was mainly Formula Atlantic, a year of Formula 3, a year of Formula 2, 2 Formula 1 races. But Garretson Enterprises was just a phenomenal organization. And yet it was really based on, yes, there were a couple professional people within that organization. Jerry Woods was pretty much dedicated to building the engines, and he was a great engine builder, is a great engine builder. And of course, Bob Garretson, he had been to Le Mans a couple times prior to my being there. And, he was a very studious guy, amateur, but very good driver, and really kind of led the team, not just on track, but off track, by example. Bob was a wonderful man who just passed away about 3-4 months ago. But that team was made up for the most part of weekend warriors. And these guys and ladies were so dedicated to this. Even today, there's guys like Marty Raffoff. He was an IBM guy. In fact, I think he just retired from IBM only a year or two ago. He's like, I always kidded him. He was the longest remaining employee of IBM. But these guys, it was just not Martin, or Marty as we call him, his brother Mark, still is involved with IMSA for many years. And Mark was involved to a certain degree, but there was just a bunch of other people that were involved, but very knowledgeable, very dedicated. These were weekend warriors that dedicated themselves to Garretson Enterprises. I mean, they loved the racing. They traveled all over the place. And I mean, it was a phenomenal team that I would put up against any pro team anytime. I mean, that was just the nature, the quality of the people that were involved, some of whom are no longer with us, but the quality of the people, dedication, and the knowledge. I mean, it was amazing, which is what attributed to their success as an organization and how they could beat very professional teams that came out of Europe. I mean, Garretson Enterprises, they were as good as it got, regardless of who we were up against. And so, when you went to places like Le Mans, and in fact, John Fitzpatrick that year with the 935 with that team was very successful across the board. I mean, when I drove there in 1980, it was raining at the start of the race. It rained for a lot of the race. I remember going at night. Now we get to night, and the road, is convoluted. The straightaway, there's dips and there's you name it. And so you're going down there. You're thinking, is that a puddle or is that just a shadow? And you're going 200 miles an hour. And if you hit a puddle at 200 miles an hour and you're not really prepared for it, that might have bad consequences. I mean, it was a super challenge in the race. Fitzpatrick and I were running together. I think he was maybe a lap ahead of us at the time. But anyway, it was dry at this point. And I was right up underneath his rear wing. The headlights on my car like bleaching out, all the sign writing on his car, they're so bright. But at the back of his car is literally on fire in the sense that, the exhaust system's glowing red. The turbos are glowing red. There's fire coming out of the turbos and out of the wastegate exhaust. And it was just the most amazing sight. You're in the middle of the night, so it's black all around this car is all lit up like a Christmas tree. I wished I had a camera. I wished I could have taken a shot because it would have just been an awesome picture. John was a tremendous driver, is a tremendous driver. But that team really is what empowered him to have the success he had. And I think he would agree with me on that. I had the benefit of the same people. So it was a bunch of weekend warriors, but these guys were pretty damn good at what they did. And they could go out and compete against anybody.
So let's talk about the 935. We had Rick Knoop on last year, who raced Kremer 935's later evolution of the same car you drove or similar car that you drove. But everybody that's talked about 935s say how unruly they are. They're just beasts that you got to manhandle. For Rick, it sort of suited his driving style. But for you, it was at its early stages of development. What did you think of driving the 935?
Well, In 1979, I won a sports car race with Brian Redman at Mid-Ohio and a Canadian driver named Ludwig Heimrath, who was one of the real star of Canadian racing. He had a 935, but it was a single turbo 935. And I drove the car in practice at Mid-Ohio, and I thought, oh my God, I don't know how you drive something like this, because the throttle lag in the car was so bad. It's one of those, you put your foot down and you count to like 5, and then all of a sudden the power comes in. I elected not to drive that car that weekend, drove with Brian, we won the race, 2-liter sports car. But by 1980, now they'd all gone to twin turbos, and that changed that car dramatically because it had response. The 935 did several things very well. One, it went like a bat out of hell. It had a lot of power. 2, the brakes were pretty good on it. All of that was mitigated by the fact that it was basically a 911 chassis. I mean, we had an adjustable front roll bar on the car. And I swore that I could move the roll bar wherever I wanted to, and there'd be no difference. There was probably that much flex in the chassis. I mean, remember, it had an aluminum tube roll cage, which you look back now and you think, good thing I never had an accident in that car, because I can't imagine an aluminum tube roll cage would do much. But the car was a flexi flyer. I mean, it's one of those deals that when you really drove the car, I mean, you could drive it with some oversteer in it. Some of that was induced by power, but some of it was by tuning the car a bit. Was it the best handling car I've ever driven? No. But, at the time, it was the most competitive car. And so you wanted to be in a 935 Porsche. A great story was I think it was 1980, in fact. We're at Elkhart Lake, and I'm in the Alpha car, and John Fitzpatrick's in the Sachs car. We're practicing, and he's like 4 seconds faster than me. And I'm just like, there's no way, because I'm driving the wheels off it, and there's no way he's 4 seconds quicker than me. And I was told, you can only go to 1.2 bar barometric pressure on the boost. Well, as you know, Elkhart Lake has 3 very long straightaways, amongst other things. And I think it was before qualifying or right after, but one of the mechanics came up to me and said, John's using 1.4 bar. Oh, really? Yeah, he's using 1.4. Okay. That's good to know. Thank you for that. So I went out and in qualifying, and of course you could raise there's I want to say a little wheelhouse or whatever where you'd adjust the boost down by the gear shift. So what the heck, I'm going to see what this does. And I didn't beat John, but I got within a tenth or something of him, because now when you go 1.4 bar, now you're going a lot faster down the straight than you are at 1.2, and you're coming off the corners a lot harder at 1.4. Engine power was almost everything in that thing. So it was the best car to drive at the time. Was it the best car, period? No, but it was a great car, and we had a lot of success in the car. And if you treated it right, careful with the gearbox, as we did at Daytona in 81, didn't get greedy with it. I mean, you could have great races in it, as we did at Daytona in 81, and it was really, at the time, just the car to have.
So let's switch gears and talk about your second attempt at Le Mans, 1982.
Let's not.
Porsche at this point had really stopped producing the 935s.
Right.
Although they were continued in privateer entries for a couple more years, they were focusing their attention on the 956 and then subsequently the 962 after that. Yeah. However, there was a big shift, especially at Garretson Enterprises, to move to a March Group C car instead of sticking with Porsche and maybe doing a 956. Why was that decision made? Do you have any inside baseball on that?
Well, first, and you might remember this, that in 81, I drove with Giampaolo Moretti in the Yost. It was a Moby Dick car, basically. It wasn't the factory car, but Yost had built his own version of the Moby Dick. Right-hand drive, which, all the 935s were left-hand drive because they're based on a stock 911 chassis. But this one was right-hand drive, of course, on road courses. Most of those road courses go clockwise. So you want to be on the, on the inside of the corners. It was a left-hand shift. That took a little getting used to. But in terms of pure, probably speed, that was a very, very quick 935. We didn't have a lot of success with it. I think we finished second in Mid-Ohio with it and what have you, but it was an amazing car. So that was a thrill. But so in 1981, it was clear that the 935 was pretty much at the end of its line. Lola had come out with the T600 that Brian drove to a championship win in IMSA in 81. And that was powered by a 6-liter Chevy, normally aspirated stock block. very strong car, especially compared to the 935s or anything else that was out at the time. So Garretson, Dick Barber, I think everybody was of the view, why don't we combine the best of English designers, i.e. Lola, with the best of what Germany could provide, which was 935 engines and gearboxes. They decided we would go to Le Mans with a Lola T600 powered by a 935 engine, 935 gearbox. Sadly or whatever, it's like anything that just wasn't given enough time, perhaps not enough resource. But I remember going to go to Le Mans. I was on my way to Europe to prepare for Le Mans, and they said, come to Sears Point. And they called it in those days. Now it's Sonoma.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, come to Sears because we want to do a test with the car before we put it on the airplane to go to Paris. So, okay. So I fly to San Francisco, drive up to Sears Point, get there, and nobody's there. I'm there, but nobody else is there. And I'm waiting, no transporter, no car, no nothing. Finally, I think it was 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I'd been there probably 6, 7 hours at the time. I called them up and I said, hey, what's going on? Is this test happening? They said, no, we're not going to be able to do the test. So I drove to the San Francisco airport and flew over to Europe. Well, you don't go to the Le Mans 24-hour with a car that's never turned a wheel prior to getting there. And that was the case with this car. If you looked at it, you'd say, oh, this thing, nobody stands a chance. But it had not turned a wheel. And it's, of course, now Brian Redmond and I are going to drive the car. We get to Le Mans. Everything, by all rights, looks like it should, just dominate. Over the couple of days, we couldn't build up any boost pressure in the car. The intercoolers leaked and God knows what all else. And again, it had never turned a wheel. Frankly, we couldn't qualify the car because it wasn't fast, because it just didn't generate the power and wasn't fast enough. I think probably in the end, that probably was a good thing, because if it had been running like a 935 engined car should run, it might have killed one of us, because frankly, it would have gone very, very fast. But very disappointing for everybody, I think. And the team had busted their butts working late nights. Again, remember, this is semi-pro team. People working on the car also have jobs during the day, not just working on that. And these people were working all night long. And it was an experience that everybody looks back now and truly understands why it wasn't able to perform. Very sad. Could have been so good, yet it was kind of so bad. And in the end, we didn't qualify and went home with our tails between our legs.
So that was 81.
That was 81.
And 82.
82, again, it's clear that the GTP category is the category. It was in IMSA. I mean, we had a 82 March GTP car to drive at Daytona. I set pole position, lap record with the car. Amazingly, we had a great engine, a guy named Franz Weiss. Franz was Jim Hall's engine builder at Chaparral. He built my engines in IndyCar. Mario Andretti's engines in IndyCar. I mean, Franz Weiss and his company and especially stock blocks, Can-Am, stuff like that. If not the best, I'm not sure who would have been better. Just produced great product. So we're at Daytona, again, 6-liter Chevy, V8, normally aspirated. And I was on pole. I mean, I remember driving past, I think it was Fitzpatrick on the banking. You think the 935's fast in a straight line, but this March with this engine, and of course it was a much smaller frontal area compared to a 935. Of course, it had instant response with the stock block Chevy. Again, set it on pole, and amazingly, we were like running, I think, third overall or so, with maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours at most to go. And finally, the gearbox gave up the ghost. But the fact that it was that strong in the 24-hour and was fairly reliable, that caused us to all think a lot about, what do you do at Le Mans? We went to Sebring a month and a half later. So again, I set pole position, lap record that still exists today on the 5.2 mile circuit. The gearbox was kind of the Achilles heel to the car, but we lost 2 of the 4 gears. I think we only had second and fourth. Even with that, and of course, a testament to Franz Weiss's engines, because I go down the back straight at Sebring and it's like pegged at 8,000 RPMs or whatever. I mean, it's just, there was no fifth gear to go to, and because it was gone. And yet, I mean, the thing ran and ran. We finished second to John Paul's 935 by, I think it was 18 seconds maybe, or 8 seconds, something like that. And Sebring was just so tough in those days physically on the cars. So in any event, this car showed that it could be competitive with anything out there. So we went to Le Mans with it that year.
At this point, you're also running IndyCar. So when you compare a Group C prototype with downforce and everything else that's different than the IndyCar, what were they like when you compare and contrast? Were they similar to drive, or were they horses of a different kind?
Well, the Indy cars were faster, even in 82. I mean, they had a lot of power, a lot of downforce, lighter. Those cars still had a fair amount of throttle lag. The Indy cars did, single turbo. And of course, on a road course, they were considerably faster than anything out there. The IndyCar was just a faster race car than IMSA or GTP, but GTP cars were still great cars to drive. As I tell people, I think the thing that always impressed me when I first started driving Indy cars in '82 was that the car never stopped accelerating, no matter how long the straightaway was. Whereas in a sports car, a 935 or a March or whatever, you'd go to Mulsanne at Le Mans, for example, and it basically stopped about halfway down the straight, accelerating, just kind of sat there. But, different cars, it's just the reality. But yeah, the March, again, you're talking about a car built by March Engineering, much more sophisticated than the 935s, the chassis design, the componentry. The 935 in many respects was still a well-developed 911, whereas a March was a pure racing car. And so consequently, the performance of the two were different. But in the end, especially in endurance racing, the Porsches, the 935s had years of experience. They had reliability. The engines were super reliable. Gearbox was, as long as you were good to them, super reliable. Brakes were good. But that's what made the difference. Whereas the March was really a car that was meant to go at most 6 hours. And to ask it to do more was probably asking too much.
For those that don't know how 1982 ended, is that how it ends for the March story at Le Mans?
Well, we split a fuel tank at Le Mans. Disappointing. We got there. We had run out of money. We no longer had Franz Weiss engines. And of course, the Mulsanne Straight's a long straightaway if you don't have any power. We went there and we just didn't have any grunt. The engine manufacturer we had, who will go unnamed, the engines just weren't good enough. Aero-wise, maybe the March carried a little too much drag in it compared to the Porsches, which you didn't really necessarily see at a place like Daytona or Sebring, but you would see it at Le Mans. In any event, we qualified, but not that well. And of course, in the race, the fuel tank split after about 3 hours, and that was that. We were done. We did run the car numerous IMSA races following Le Mans. One of the things we found after Le Mans, which was that Sebring had basically destroyed the chassis. The rivets in the monocoque had been loosened up or fell out, the car was not prepared well. Again, financially, it wasn't Garretson, it was the sponsor of the team. Ran out of money. And so the maintenance of the car suffered as a result. And of course, the different engine builder, all these things contributed to not really having a competitive proposition at Le Mans in '82. Of course, then again, the fuel tank splits, and very disappointing. I'm not sure we would have been as competitive as, say, we were at Daytona or Sebring, but we should have been more competitive than we were. And in any event, we went back to the States, ran a few more races, again, with not very good engines. Again, suffered the consequence of that. So the glory races for that car, for us at least, was Daytona and Sebring. Now the next year with Creepy Crawley, they're the ones who put a 935 gearbox and engine in a March and dominated Daytona and won a lot of races. And then of course later on in '84, now I'm driving Bruce Levin's 962 Porsche, one of the first ones. And we're racing against Randy Lanier and the Whittingtons in a March Chevy, and that car had been fully developed, and that was the car to have. So the March chassis was the right chassis. It's just we didn't have the resource to really run it properly, and we suffered as a result.
Did your Le Mans journey stop in '82 because of your rise in IndyCar, or were there other attempts to go back to Le Mans over the years?
Well, for the most part, yes, because of IndyCar. The Portland IndyCar race used to always be on the same weekend or thereabouts as Le Mans in June. One of my great what ifs with my great friend Jochen Maas, who he and I won Sebring together in '87 with the 962, is that he asked me to drive with him in the Sauber, the Mercedes. And I think it was 1989, because we had obviously won Sebring together. We became friends, good co-drivers together, good relationship. I had to say no. And of course, that's the year he won Le Mans, or one of the years he won Le Mans with the Mercedes powered Sauber. As you can imagine, what ifs, right? The thing that kind of disappoints me in myself is that when I started to focus more just on IndyCar racing, I think probably around 1990, 91, that was a mistake. Having had the success I'd had in IndyCar, I'd won the 500 by that time, I'd won a couple championships, I'd won Sebring in '87, a number of other IMSA races in '87. I don't know why, but I thought, I don't want to travel that much or something. And I decided not to get out of sports car racing. And I really think I lost opportunities that could have perhaps enabled me to win Le Mans, because I really think that would have been great to say, you won Indy, you won Le Mans, never won Formula One World Championship, but those are two pretty good championships to win. In any event, I look back and I think, I shouldn't have done that. because as I say, I think I would have had opportunities, but it is what it is. Now for me, it's really about, I want RLL, Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing, to go to Le Mans. Well, I may not be able to win it as a driver. I can win it as a team owner. And that's certainly something that I've been disappointed over the last several years with BMW. We weren't asked to do that. But, maybe one of these days we can go there as a team and win the race. That won't maybe be quite the same as winning as a driver, but it'll be pretty nice.
Since we're talking about lessons learned, one of the things that a lot of the pro drivers that we have on the show talk about is how Le Mans profoundly changed them as a driver and the things that they took away, the memories, obviously, that they created, that enthusiasm, they reached their bucket list. It was a whole new experience. How did Le Mans change you? What did you learn from it? Lessons, memories that you took back with you to IndyCar, maybe made you a better driver?
Well, I think that Le Mans, especially with the 935, remember, it didn't have a rev limiter. I mean, it was a synchromesh transmission, it wasn't straight cut gears. It wasn't like today where the gearing's electronically or hydraulically motivated, it was a conventional gearbox. It was conventional brakes. And Brian Redmond was really a great teacher for me about this, is that, this is how you have to drive the car in order to get it to the end of the race, whether it's Daytona, Sebring, Le Mans, whatever. And it really did teach me how to get the maximum out of the car, having minimum, I don't want to say consequence, but, get the most speed out of the car at the least price to the car. In other words, taking it easy on the brakes, careful on the gearbox, making sure when you make the shift that you're in gear. I mean, all these things, because you didn't have the protections that you have today. I remember Redmond telling me that one year he and Siffert were pretty much ready to win Le Mans with maybe 2 hours to go, and Siffert missed a gear shift on the front straight, over-revved the engine in the 917, and it blew up, and that was that. That was the same with the 935. I mean, you had to be sure of everything you did, and you had to be careful of everything you did, and you had to drive it carefully as you could go, and yet as quickly as you could go. And that later on, with Indy cars and everything else I drove, 962, whatever, that later on gave me great experience, great lessons to learn from. They gave me the success that I had in later years.
All right, Bobby. So before we transition into our last segment here, wrapping up this episode, there's a couple crowd questions for you.
Sure.
So first off, Ron Meyer writes, can you please ask him about the Otter Pops sponsor?
Well, that was IndyCar. Yeah, Paul Pope owned a company called Otter Pops. That's frozen popsicles, right? He regrettably passed away a few years ago, but just a great guy. I had a great time with him. And he got hooked up with Maury Cranes, who owned Craco, who was the owner of the Craco team. I went to drive for Craco in '89. Otter Pops was one of the associate sponsors. Yeah, we were very popular in the paddock area because we had all the Otter Pop bars for everybody. But yeah, I guess one of the best things about racing over the years for me is, and I tell people this, is that you meet really fabulous people. Some aren't so fabulous, but frankly, most are. And Paul was certainly one of those. Maury Cranes was certainly one of those. And I was fortunate to count them as friends, and fortunate to drive for them, and fortunate to have a lot of experiences with them.
Bob Varsha.
Oh, boy.
The Bob Varsha wants to know, what advice would you give your son Graham about continuing his driving career when everything else is going so well? And do you see yourself running a Le Mans Classic with him?
So first off, in 2005, Graham was running, what do they call it, Mazda, Super Mazda or something like that. He finished second at Montreal for the Montreal Grand Prix. And we got on a plane. I said, we're going to go to Le Mans, because I really was pushing him to say, one of these days, you've got to go run Le Mans. You got to do it. So I took him over there now in 2005. So in '05, he was 16 years old. So we flew over, and we didn't stay for the race, but we flew over and we walked around the track, basically. We're hacking through the bush. Actually, I said, I want you to go down. We're going to go down to this place called Hunaudière, which is halfway down the Mulsanne Strait, right? And there's a bar on one side, restaurant. And I said, I want you to go down. We're going to go down there. And we got through the bush and watched the cars go by at 200 miles an hour. Then we went back to the paddock, went up on the Ferris wheel. Very kind of emotional kind of thing, that all these sensations that I had experienced over my years that I wanted him to get a feel for and appreciation of, and got up in the Ferris wheel there right by the last chicane and at night practice. And, as I've always told him, and I still tell him, I said, he's still a young guy. He's 36 years old. So he's got plenty of time if he wants to go there. But to race at Le Mans, what a great experience it was for me. I hope he does it one day, because I think he'll feel the same way. As far as the Le Mans Classic, I've done that twice. Brian Redmond, I had a 917 Porsche in 2002, the first Le Mans Classic. He and I drove that car there. I thought, who better than to get Brian Redmond to co-drive with you in a 917 Porsche? We had mechanical issues, so we didn't finish, but still a great experience. And later, then I went and raced in a 3-liter Lola prototype 3 or 4 years later. I'm done racing. My day's over. And I don't think Graham's ready to. I think he always thought I was crazy doing these races with these old race cars because they're certainly no safer today than they were in the day, which wasn't very safe, right? So I doubt I can get him into one. But yeah, that's a great event. Le Mans is a great event. Le Mans Classic's a great event, especially if you love the old historic cars and you see many of them. And I was very fortunate. I drove a fellow's 250 LM Ferrari one time there at the Le Mans Classic. The Lola T286 was a 3-liter DFE Cosworth powered car. Of course, the 917 and others. So, Le Mans is Le Mans. It doesn't matter what's driving on the track. It's a hell of an event and a hell of an experience.
So since you brought up Classic, that would have been the new track format because
yes,
it started way after the redesign. When you compare driving Le Mans now, let's say in a Classic event compared to then, what do you think of the evolution of the track?
Well, I'm a traditionalist in a lot of ways. I can understand maybe one of the chicanes on Mulsanne. I'm not sure about two, but I can understand that. I was fortunate, and I feel fortunate to say to people today, oh yeah, no, I drove the real Mulsanne straight. And there is no question that the risk factor was high. No question about it. Maybe I feel less concerned about it because nothing ever happened to me on that part of the track. But for sure, a lot of risk. I'm glad I experienced that. So I understand why they made the chicanes at Le Mans. But frankly, I think they caused more incidents than they had before. The most disappointing change for me at Le Mans today compared to when I drove is the Dunlop curve. Coming up the front straight, going up the hill underneath the Dunlop Bridge. It was a fast bend that then led down to that left-hand corner. I can't remember the name of it. I want to say Tetra Rouge, but I don't think it is. And that was an amazing corner, fast and yet, really a test, not horribly risky, I would say, but still just a really great corner and a great sight on the track, arcing over the hill and turning right slightly. And that's gone. And what they've got now is, I'm not a big fan of it. But the rest of the track is really not a whole lot different than when I drove it. In fact, when I drove my 917 there, when you came through Mulsanne Corner, and went towards Indianapolis, that's pretty much the same as it was 1970 or 71. And so when I told people, I said, when I went through there, you're going there 200 miles an hour. And I went through, there's two kinks, right, between Mulsanne and Indianapolis. And the second one has a little bit more elevation to it. And you go through there. You don't have to squint too much to think it was 1970. It was really right out of the movie Le Mans. There, the rest of the track is not a whole lot different. But as I said, I kind of get Mulsanne, but I'm really disappointed about the changes they made at Dunlop.
So, Bobby, earlier you talked about what ifs, a lot of thinking about what ifs. So, what if we could transport Bobby Rahal 1980 to 2025? What car would you jump in to run the 24 Hours of Le Mans this year?
I think you'd have to say it's got to be a Porsche. The odds are pretty good if you're in a Porsche. My dad raced a Porsche Carrera 6. We had an Elva Porsche. Of course, I drove the 935s, drove the 962, which I did 5 races in 87 in IMSA. I won 3 of them with the 962. And then I won 2 other races with the 962. So, it was an amazing car. And I have the feeling that driving the current Porsche is not a whole lot different, which is why they win a lot of races. Because if there's a company that understands endurance racing, it's Porsche. If I'm going to go back and if there's a car, for sure, the manufacturer would be Porsche.
So looking back, how do you think your participation in Le Mans contributes to the broader story of your racing legacy?
Well, I think there's just the fact that I did it. Again, I wasn't successful doing it, but I was willing to try just about anything to further my career. And for me, clearly, because of my father's experience racing at Sebring and Watkins Glen, my being there from a gopher to a weekend warrior mechanic, teenager to seeing the racing. Sports car racing was always very important to me. It still is. Last 17 years or 18 years for me, some of the best has been associated with BMW in their sports car racing program. We've won Daytona twice, won Sebring a couple times, a lot of other races. I just love sports car racing. It's like anything. I don't think I made Le Mans in any way. I think it made me in certain ways. It's disappointing not to go back to be able to drive there or be a team owner there, at least for the moment. But clearly, one of these days, just being able to tell people my experience going down the Mulsanne Straight, or my experience of going through Indianapolis or the Dunlop curve. That to me, I have an experience that few people have. And that's something that I treasure. And it's something I think has value for people when they're interested in talking about great events like the Le Mans 24 Hour.
What's next? You kind of hinted at a couple things. What's going on?
Well, I mean, I'm hopeful next is us as a team running at Le Mans one of these days. That's the big goal. I mean, obviously, we still want to go win Indy again. We've won that 3 times as a team, and for me, once as an owner. So 4 victories at Indy. Want to do more of that. I mean, anything we enter, we want to win, but I would love to be able to go back to Le Mans as a team and competitively race against the other teams and potentially win that race. Maybe I'd hang it up after that. I'm not sure because after you won Indy and Daytona and Le Mans, kind of like, well, what else is there, right?
On that note, it's time for me to pass the torch to our ACO USA president for some final thoughts.
Bobby, thank you so much. It's been an honor and a pleasure on behalf of the ACO USA community. You're
Thank
so
you.
gracious with your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's great seeing you. And, this is an important event for all of us, right? And I love talking about it. Wish I could talk more about it. Wish I had more experience, but I love talking about it. And as I say, one day maybe we'll be back there.
We look forward to that.
Thank you.
And that's the finish line for this evening with a legend, where we took a closer look at the endurance racing chapter of Bobby Rahal's storied career. Known to most as an IndyCar legend and team owner, Bobby's ventures into the 24 hours reveal a driver eager to push boundaries and compete on the world's biggest motorsport stage. Bobby's experiences behind the wheel and lessons learned in the grueling environment of Le Mans adds yet another layer to his already remarkable legacy. So to keep up with Bobby's ongoing work in motorsport, check out Rahal.com or follow Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing on your favorite social media platforms. And we hope you enjoyed this presentation and look forward to more Evening with a Legend throughout the season. And on behalf of everyone here and those listening at home, thank you, Bobby, for sharing your stories with us.
My pleasure. And thank you so much for giving me the time to chat with everybody and with yourselves. And it's been a real pleasure.
And on a personal note, it has been an absolute honor to interview you tonight. So watching you growing up on TV, all those kinds of things, absolutely amazing.
Well, thank you. Take care.
This episode has been brought to you by the Automobile Club of the West and the ACO USA. From the awe-inspiring speed demons that have graced the track to the courageous drivers who have pushed the limits of endurance, the 24 Hours of Le Mans is an automotive spectacle like no other. For over a century, the 24 Hours Le Mans has urged manufacturers to innovate for the benefit of future motorists, and it's a celebration of the relentless pursuit of speed and excellence in the world of motorsports. To learn more about or to become a member of the ACO USA, look no further than www.lemans.org. Click on English in the upper right corner, and then click on the ACO Members tab for club offers. Once you've become a member, you can follow all the action on the Facebook group ACO USA Members Club and become part of the legend with future Evening with the Legend meetups. This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.